So here we go. Then again, the kingdom of heaven could be likened to 10 attendants who took their lamps and went to meet the bridal party. 5 of them were wise, 5 were foolish. When the foolish ones took their lamps, they didn't take any oil with them. But the wise ones took enough oil to keep their lamps burning. The bridal party was delayed, so they all fell asleep. At midnight, there was a cry. Oh yeah, there's another question. Who's the one crying? Anyway, at midnight, there was a cry. Here comes the bridal party. Let's go out to meet them. Then all the attendants rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise ones, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "Perhaps there won't be enough for us." Oh, I don't like that. That was not in the translation. "Run to the dealers and go get some more for yourselves." While the foolish ones went to buy more oil, the bridal party arrived, and those who were ready went to the marriage feast with them, and the door was shut. When the foolish attendants returned, they pleaded to be let in. The doorkeeper replied, "The truth is, I don't know you." And here comes the little summary. "So stay awake, for you don't know the day or the hour." Here endeth the reading. Kind of an interesting one. Doesn't it raise a lot of questions? Gosh, you know, like who's the one that's calling out, "Hey, they're here finally," and who's the one who's saying, "I don't know you," and shuts the door on them? And what is it with those, I'm sorry to just say it the way I'm going to say it, what is it with those stinking wise women that aren't going to share their oil? Like, seriously, that's not God of abundance. Okay.
Well,
So
but they had the right wedding garments also. Perhaps the other 5 didn't have the right wedding garments.
that's right. So, you know, I don't know. There's just you know, we say about unconditional love, but then there's all these conditions about getting into the so-called marriage feast. So I don't know. I'm going to turn it over to who wants to read another translation? Maybe the one, anybody?
I will.
Tina. Okay.
This is the Harper Study Bible version.
Okay.
Then the kingdom of heaven shall be compared to 10 maidens who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom.
You're frozen.
Uh-oh.
She's not frozen for me. Tina, you're just fine for me.
Okay. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those maidens rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "Perhaps there will not be enough for us and for you. Go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other maidens came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly, I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
Thank you, Tina.
Welcome.
So, Tom, you're muted. Is that because your dogs are going off?
No, they're right here, but I'm afraid they will go off.
So let's just go around and what is jumping out at folks. We'll start with you, Tom, first, since you just muted yourself again.
Yeah, and the other thing is by muting, I help stabilize the network so that
Connection.
there's less sound. So that's the other reason to do it.
Okay.
I guess I've never had as bad a reaction to this as I have had with the poor man who didn't have the right wedding garment. And I guess that's because I think you should be prepared with your lamp when you go out. You should take enough oil. I think it is pretty foolish to go outside without recharging the battery on your flashlight or without an overcoat. Or it's foolish in Maine to get in the truck or car in the wintertime and not have the things that to deal with a breakdown or being stuck in the cold outside. It isn't to say that that doesn't happen to me, but to me, I feel a little bit like maybe I'm in Jesus's audience listening to this, that this is counseling about being prepared and not taking things for
everybody.
granted.
I missed part of that. Can you repeat it?
Oh, I think this is, well, I feel like I'm a simpleton in Jesus's audience, and that this applies just as much today. It's really about not taking things for granted and not rushing off to do things without being sufficiently prepared.
So
and
you're kind of
think it's good
critical from what
advice.
I can hear.
What?
Yeah, so it sounds like you don't have much sympathy for the foolish bridesmaids.
Well, I've been a foolish bridesmaid. Yeah. but I think that's human nature. I mean, I understand half of me goes off, half cocked some of the time, right? I'm so eager to go outside, I forgot to put on the coat, and then I say, oh my gosh, it's 25 degrees out here. I better go back inside and get a coat, right? But that doesn't, I was foolish. They are foolish. And, the fact of the matter is that maybe because I did that, I didn't get a chance to see the deer that was running across the meadow because I didn't go out prepared. I mean, there have been any number of times people have pointed out something wonderful happening outdoors, and I've rushed out and then said, oh gosh, I got to go get a coat, or I've got to go get this or that. I go back in, and by the time I go outside, it's past. So I appreciate this passage. Maybe I'm being Barbara here, but I find it a good admonition. And since I feel that half the time I'm a foolish bridesmaid and half the time I'm a wise bridesmaid, I don't really see it as mostly about being totally excluded. I see it as missing an opportunity. That's all.
I like that. Mama Susan will be back. It's interesting when, and this is an observation on the Zoom software.
Okay.
I see myself frozen. It's only me. The others can still talk with each other and are not frozen. So it's if you see yourself frozen, it's your connection that is trying to work better. So technical observation.
Okay.
Tom, has that been your experience with Zoom? Yeah. So Kathy, Sandy,
Yes.
respond to the reading?
I, like Tom, was inspired by the last couple of sentences there about not being prepared, or being prepared. I guess it is trying to say to us, maybe I'm reading into it, but we need to be prepared in our lives, try to stay close to Jesus's words and actions. You're foolish if you don't stay connected. So it makes me think of us, even though we're having our challenges right now about Bishop's, edict yesterday, if you will, we can't meet in person again. So here we are, Zooming. if I didn't do this, if we all didn't do this, I think we would lose one another. We would lose our church. It's just staying connected is important. And in doing that, you know, we're staying prepared. This might be a blip in our history, you know, for a few months we need to do this, but, you know, next spring, hopefully we can meet again in person. So stay prepared and don't lose our connection.
I like that. I was really impressed once that edict came out from the bishop that the whole team at St. Andrews went into action, and within hours, we were ready to carry on.
I'm impressed by that too, and I'm thankful.
Sandy, comments?
Maybe the voice that they say was that we hear, perhaps it was St. Peter, because they say he has the gates to the kingdom of heaven. And I do think that the ones who filled their lamps, they are prepared, they are staying connected. And therefore, when we do go out into the world, we have that support, we have God's grace, that we will be able to overcome all those temptations out there. With the communication as it is today, there just appears to be so much more that can be tempting to us.
Oh,
In the
yes,
wrong
yes.
direction.
Good point.
Tina?
Two things. Being prepared makes me think now when I go out the door to go somewhere, okay, where's my mask? Where are my gloves? And just making sure that I remember exactly, that I remember to have them with me. And it's just become such a part of our preparation to step out. It's just like putting on our coat, and now my coat has its orange vest on it in the closet and on the hanger, so I don't have to grab the vest every time I go out.
Yeah.
So there's that. And one thing that we noticed early on in the pandemic was that masks have taken the place of fuzzy dice as far as hanging on people's rearview mirrors.
That's funny.
But one thing that stood out to me in between the two readings, Susan, the one that she read first, and then the Harper Bible, when the other maidens came back from getting their oil and they asked to be let in, the version that you read said that they addressed the door attendant. And this one is in quotation, says, Lord, Lord, open to us. And I think that's a big difference. Like Sandy said, maybe it's St. Peter. And you also, and you think usually when someone's addressed Lord, Lord, they're addressing Jesus.
Yes.
I also, this is going to sound really strange, but I think of the fig tree here. Remember how Jesus would get frustrated every once in a while and say, you're not bearing fruit. Well, these bridesmaids ran off because they were unprepared, and then they show up late, and he says, truly, I don't know you. I don't know the rest of that story. Is that the final word? Are we really sure that's the final word? I mean, the quote is, truly, I tell you, I don't know you. My mother used to say that sort of thing to me when I did something that she didn't like. I don't know you, Tom, Thomas. Actually, she never called me Tom. I was always Thomas, Why did you go do that sort of thing? That was stupid. That's not the Thomas I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we take this, truly, I tell you, I do not know you, as a very final kind of rejection when it's not necessarily. It can be an expression of frustration and disappointment that they didn't live up to their potential in this particular case, and actually I think Tina made a really good point. I all the time am getting out of the car and starting to walk towards a store to go inside, and I've forgotten my mask.
Mm.
And 99% of the time I run back to the car and get it. But every once in a while, someone at the door tells me, where's your mask? Truly, I don't know you. You can't come in here without your mask. Right? And that doesn't mean I can never go in. It's just they're disappointed in me. And I'm disappointed in myself that I got out of the car without remembering my mask.
That's a good point.
It also makes me think of when somebody that you know really well does something unexpected or reacts unexpectedly to a situation. Who are you and what have you done with so-and-so?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that there were 5 and 5. And I think that relates, Tom, to your earlier comments. Half the time I'm the wise one, half the time I'm not. So that sort of balance in life, how frequently are we really in tune, which Kathy talked about. Yeah, so here we are imperfect, and maybe this is just a reminder to be more, well, I'll use some yoga terms here, be more centered and self-aware and in the present, so that we're more likely to be the wise and less likely to be the foolish.
So I wanted, did Kathy, did you have a chance to say something too?
Yes, I was talking about being prepared, especially with our pandemic.
So if I'm understanding it right, most everybody here, if I've heard, because I missed some of the stuff, this is really a message about being prepared. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Well, and I think also maybe Bill's notion of centeredness
right.
and not rushing. It's very easy in the excitement of going out to meet the bridegroom and going off to a party to forget things. It's very easy for me getting out of the car and the excitement of going to the Hannafords or going to the variety store to forget my mask. But there are consequences for that. And, so yeah, I think being more centered, more stable, more, yeah.
So do you all, maybe I'll read another translation here, but do you think that there's a more of a significance beyond this message of centeredness, preparedness, but that there's a theological commentary going on here, whether, that the author might be trying to point out something about who are the attendants or the bridal party and who is the groom and who is allowed in, and what are we like? Are we performing up to par as attendants to Christ? Because the church is known as the bride. The church is known as the bride in theology. That's one thing. And of course, there's a lot of people that take exception to that and they don't like that.
But also, how do we know they didn't get in? All we know is that he says, truly, I tell you, I don't know you.
Right.
But it doesn't say you're not coming in. He just says, I don't know you.
And what did they say in reply? We don't know.
And what do they say in reply? And what happens next? We actually don't know any of that. I think it's wrong to take the truly, I tell you, I don't know you at greater value than when my mother would say it to me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's no question that they were foolish and they had to go back and get oil and they showed up late and truly, I don't know you. What have you been up to? Why did this happen? But I mean, the idea that the door is totally closed on them, I don't get that. I mean, yes, the door was shut, but the door can be opened again. Doors can always be opened again. So I don't get the finality. I honestly don't.
Okay.
I get the foolishness. I get the lack of preparation. I get the disappointment. But I don't see this as Judgment Day. I really don't.
Okay, but what happens when you continue with this chapter 25? And if you take Matthew in a broader context, you know, the next passage, was the one you're going to be preaching on, Tom. And, you know,
You're taking it
people are
away
given,
from me now? You said the one I was going to be preaching on. What do you mean?
well,
I don't get to preach on it now because I'm a naughty boy?
just shut the door.
Shut the-
Shut the door.
Truly, I don't know you.
I don't know you. No, the one you will be preaching on. But I'm just saying, if you look further ahead, there's this whole idea about 5 talents being given to one, and so there's 3 slaves or servants, and they're all given varying degrees, and some of them, the one that has only 1, he hides it away because he doesn't want to lose it, or so he wants to give it back, but he doesn't do anything as far as increasing it, which could be thought of as increasing the kingdom. There's no fruits there. And then the guy in the middle, he's done okay, but it all ends up in the hands of the guy that gambled all sorts of money and got the best payoff, so he ends up with 10 talents. So there's this whole idea of, what are we doing with what we've been given? And
I think they're fundamentally different stories, because the story for this Sunday is about people who go back and get something. They're not given oil by the Lord. They go get the oil. So they actually spend money and time and effort to hurry back and come to the feast. The second story, the one I am going to preach about, has the very fearful slave who takes the 1 talent and buries it and does nothing with it. But these 5 foolish bridesmaids actually go to a lot of effort. They go to twice the effort of the wise bridesmaids, because they go out, then they have to go back, then they have to get more oil, then they come running back, then the door is shut. I think they're 2 very different stories. I understand your notion that they fit into a larger arc, but I don't actually. I think there are plenty of places in Matthew where you jerk from one parable to another, and it's not necessarily true that there's a linear connection between them.
I think it connects more to the end of chapter 24.
Mm-hmm.
The heading over verse 36 is watchfulness. No one knows the day or the hour, you must be ready. And chapter 40, verse 45 rather on, is the master will come on a day when the servant does not expect him, and at an hour he doesn't know. So I think it kind of maybe ties those together, rather than, this being the end of that thought maybe, or the final, what's the word I want? The final way of saying that one idea of watch.
Which is what a teacher does when you're not getting your message across and you try another angle, right, Bill?
Yeah, indeed. I have a question. Is the parable of the sheep and goats in Matthew?
Yes.
Okay, so it seems to me, you asked if there are theological implications of this. This seems, as Tom was saying, a pretty passive error in not being prepared. But the sheep and the goats, 2 groups, that's very definitive in terms of our behavior and our favor in God's sight based on that behavior. We fed the poor, we visited the sick, and so on, versus we didn't do that. And that seems a more final kind of closing the door than this closing the door on these bridesmaids. So
It is in the same chapter. It's in chapter 25. It's all kind of connected with the destruction of the temple foretold, which we know that this was written probably after the destruction had actually happened. And some commentators feel that they're trying to analyze what happened, what went wrong, were we not prepared? Didn't we see this coming? So there is some of that that's suggested in these readings. And there's the judgment of the nations. And then after that is the plot to kill Jesus. So it's like this pivot moment where, are we doing all that we need to do to be prepared for the end of the age? I mean, there's that.
Here's a really strange, and I apologize in advance for this, but in my family, we had this tradition: if we were waiting up for a family member to come and it was dark or we had been waiting, we're all eager to see them. My mother or one of my siblings would usually tell one of us, usually me because I was the youngest, to go to the bathroom, because the people would surely arrive while I was occupied on the bathroom. Right. Because that's the way it worked, right? I mean, you waited and waited, and then finally you gave up and you said, I have to go to the bathroom. Boom, they show up, right? So it was sort of like looking around. I mean, I go back to I think it's a really important point that 5 are wise and 5 are foolish. You almost need some foolish to be wise. Mm-hmm. How do you know who's wise if you don't have some who are foolish? Mm-hmm. And the foolish ones, and this goes back to the tax collectors and the sinners, the publicans, the harlots. The foolish ones actually make more of an effort. I just keep coming back to that. The wise ones had it easy here because they were wise. I give them that. But the foolish covered 2 or 3 times the ground, and were probably huffing and puffing and sweating from their effort. And it's a little bit like me when I was sent off to the bathroom and then came running out. And of course I was late to greet whoever it was who was arriving, because that was my designated role, the foolish one.
I think you're onto something really great here, because, when you think about the understanding that God chooses the foolish of the world to make a statement, basically, then so maybe the message here is not, oh yeah, everything's hunky-dory, we were wise, we got in, we were like ready, but like I said, they weren't very nice, which has always really bothered me. They didn't want to share their oil.
Right.
That always really has bothered me. But if this is a critique of the wise and a nudge for the foolish to get your act in gear, then maybe it really is not so much praise of the wise, but a nudge of the foolish.
Yeah.
Because this always really bothered me about them being, stingy.
Well, and I like that, typically in rabbinical fashion, Jesus sometimes confounds who is wise and who is foolish. Yeah. I'm certainly not feeling very wise today, given not exactly what I expected to happen based upon the information that I had, right? And my neighbor who didn't read a single thing or whatever, he seems pretty wise. And so, when I thought I was superior to him because I had done all sorts of preparation and reading and, was so well informed of what the possibilities were in this election, he turns out to be the smart one, right? And Jesus often turns things on its head that way.
Yes, he does.
Well, why is the focus on the bridesmaids? Like, so if you're reading this, who are you relating to? I guess, because you always have these cast of characters. And one of the things that I learned in a preaching workshop that I went to 3 years ago was, who are the listeners relating to? So I guess that's a question for us.
I relate to both. Because one day I'm certainly doing things that are foolish. And I think the idea is to learn from that so that you can be wise.
Yeah.
And one thing that just hit me was the fact that give someone a fish and you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you fed them for a lifetime. And with that being said, I think that if they bridesmaids that were prepared gave their oil, then nothing was learned.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
True.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And
Kathy.
as my dog is carrying on, I will mute myself.
My dog is old and sleeping next to me. She's very old.
In your comfort.
Yeah, she's as long as she's like 2 feet away from my feet, she's happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about you, Kathy? What do you think? Who are you relating to? I mean, there's of course there's the bridegroom, there's the attendant, there's somebody yelling, hey, they're coming. So there's the half and half, virgins, bridesmaids, attendants.
Well, I guess sometimes, like Sandy said, I think it's all of us. There are times in our lives that we are like really organized. We have everything all set and we are good to go. There are those moments when you have to learn. This morning, I'm trying to get onto Zoom. So what did I use? I used the church's Zoom numbers and I couldn't get into the meeting. I'm like, this has to be wrong.
That's kind of cool. I couldn't get into the meeting.
And then you see, wrong assumption. So then I had to go into my email. I was like, oh, there's the email from Bill saying, click here. So,
That's pretty funny. The new equivalent is, are you ready with your Zoom code? And, we go into the waiting room to be admitted. And then the attendant, Bill, says, I don't know you. You can't get in.
So, we can be in both places in different parts of our lives, different times. And I guess a lot of times I feel like probably foolish bridesmaids running to the oil man to get my lamp oil. So been there, done that. And there are times when I'm like really good and I am dressed for the party and everything's so I can relate to both sides.
I think Sandy made a really, really great point about the teachable moment here.
Yeah.
Because we all have that in life. We all fail to prepare or fail to anticipate what's going to be required in a situation. And then we try to remember not to let that happen again. And yet usually it does. 10, 20, 30 years later, we make the same mistake all over again. And that's why I don't see, just the way I read it, but also I certainly hope that because we make a mistake once, we're not damned forever. We can learn.
Yes.
And so I do think it's interesting, almost, Susan, that maybe most of the attention is on the foolish bridesmaids, but maybe the ones that wouldn't share their oil deserve a little bit of focus, because they could have all gone through the same experience and maybe all learned together, instead of which it was divided, sort of like America right now, 50-50.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, one half had to run around like crazy and freak out, while the other half was inside at the party. But I agree with Sandy that the half the 5 that ran around and made the extra effort and freaked out probably will never forget that, and will probably not make the same mistake quite soon.
Right. Yeah,
That,
excellent point.
that word mistake reminds me of a set of lessons that I used with Samantha, who has been carrying me since Joyce's passing. Early in our relationship, talking a lot about mistakes that she made in her life, 2 lousy
Right.
marriages, so on. And it finally occurred to me, no, you made a decision and you learned from it.
Yep.
It wasn't a mistake. You're not a mistake. You're not a mistaken person. Those are decisions you learn from, and now you're making better decisions. So, Tom, yeah, absolutely. We learn from those decisions,
Yes.
and maybe we should refrain from calling them mistakes.
Yeah, excellent point. So here's the other thing. Since we're talking about a wedding feast or a wedding banquet, it just occurred to me after Tom mentioned something, I don't know, my brain went to the whole idea about keep knocking on the door, because you do have the persistent widow, remember? She'd learned enough throughout the ages that she was like, I'm going to get justice. I'm going to just keep pounding on this judge's door until I get what I want. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a stretch, but these are young bridesmaids, or, maidens is one of the translations. And so if maybe they're just inexperienced, maybe they haven't had enough life experience to, to figure things out and how to be ready for, the occasion. So, it's probably, something to do with these life experiences. And like Sandy said, they'll learn. What
Of course,
about others?
if they are young, you're saying, I mean, we could be talking really young bridesmaids, young teenagers, for example. You wouldn't have known, oh yeah, there's the lamp, let's go get the lamps. But none of them remembered that you have to have a reserve, over here, the lamp, goes out, you need to have more oil. So no one understood that they needed to bring that with them. So I'm agreeing with Tom that the person at the door is going to let them in. This isn't going to be a end of story. Nobody's coming. And they did go to the dealer. They did get some more. So you got to give them credit that they worked at it. So I think there is forgiveness or understanding maybe for their, youth.
I missed a little bit of that. Sorry, I'm going to mute myself.
Oh. So I was just saying that they'll be forgiven at the door because they put their lamp oil and they did what they needed to do to be accepted. I would imagine they were let in the door.
I just suggest to everyone here, the next time that a significant other, husband, spouse, wife, friend, family member forgets their key and is locked out of the house and you're inside, just go to the door and tell them, oh, you foolish bridesmaid, too bad on you.
Yeah, that's not going to go over too big.
Yeah, right. But it does sound fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So here's another thing for us to think about then. They all fell asleep, all of them. So why don't we pick that apart a little bit?
Well, if it was like weddings are today, with all the preparation and all the time spent getting ready, they were probably exhausted. And if they were young girls, I imagine they had been running around together. What are we going to wear? And what are we going to do? And who's going to do what? And they, they were just probably really tired. And they get to the wedding and they expect it to take place, or the feast, right then, and it doesn't. So there's that letdown. So I'd probably fall asleep too.
Good point.
We could also kind of think about the fact that maybe it's a moment of teaching too for us because we become very complacent.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, something wakes us up, and that's that voice that was shouting, he's coming. And it just kind of like, okay, wake up and get back in line.
There.
And it's a little bit like, you know, being an amateur weatherman, when we get the alerts, you know, there's a winter storm watch, there's a winter storm warning. Oh, wow, we don't have any wood in the house. I better go out to the wood pile and get some wood, you know. The wise bridesmaids would have already had their wood stacked by the wood stove and be ready to go. The foolish ones have to run out in the cold and bring it on in. But, you know, I think there are just so many examples of this. And I think I understand the biblical context, you know, for Matthew's audience, but if this is really the word of God, I think we sometimes get distracted by the words sleeping and foolish, when both of those I think are pretty innate. We all sleep. We sleep every day. We sleep at night. I mean, I take a nap every day. I don't know about you, but anyway, and then I sleep at night, and things happen in the night, and I hope I'm prepared for them when I get jerked awake. Sometimes the dogs come and lick my face, and then I know that I better be prepared to go outside. You know, I mean, so, and foolish is such a loaded term. You know, they were unprepared, yeah. But foolish and wise is so, I prefer to hear it in my mother's voice, you know, which wouldn't be quite so harsh. She would still say you're being foolish, or she, you know, that was very wise of you, but it wouldn't be so absolute.
All right, so since everybody knows I'm the teacher's pet, I always try to do things that, you know, I really like, I was raised in the Coast Guard, semper paratus, always ready, right? So that's my motto. I try to live by it. So two quickie sharings. One was the day before yesterday, when we knew the temperature was going to drop a lot, and we were up in Kingfield. I said to Jim, I know that our new oil tank, not new oil tank, but the oil tank in the house shows that it's full. I'm nervous and I don't believe it, because what if the thing is stuck and it's registering full and it's really not full? It's a perfect story. So why, how can we check it? And so he goes downstairs and he's bang, 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 bang on the side of the tank. It sounds really empty. I mean, I am growing with alarm, because it's like, okay, this is Sunday and we can't get a hold of the oil company, and we filled out the forms. They're supposed to come and check. It's supposed to be, you know, just they check us regularly. And he said that in the information when we closed, that the tank was just filled up. So I'm like, I don't believe any of that. Very skeptical. So he's banging and he says it sounds empty. So I was like, yeah, it does. So he's trying to open up one of the big, you know, plugs on the top, and he can't get it open. And he's strong and he's struggling. He can't get open. So I said, well, try the thing with the gauge in it, because he didn't think that would open, but it did. So he got it open, and sure enough, it was almost to the brim with oil.
Huh.
Such a relief, because but it just sounded empty. And he was like, better for you, you know, good for you to do this. It was good that we checked it out. So anyway, I can totally relate to this whole oil thing. But last night I was trying to stay awake and I fell asleep. I was trying to stay awake to pay attention to the election results. And probably, I think I must have fallen asleep around 11:30 or midnight on the couch, with my live update screen in front of me. And all of a sudden I get this ding, and it was Sophie checking in with me, because she works all night, you know. So she she sent me a text message wondering if I was she was just checking on me. She usually says, "Good night, Mom. Hope you sleep well," or something like that. But so I jumped up because I had fallen asleep on the couch, and now this was like 1:30 or something. So anyway, I finally got up off the couch and went to actual bed and closed my tablet and said, "Well, it'll be what it'll be."
Right.
But so it is, even when you try to stay awake and and I was being foolish for trying to do that because all the reports said, "Don't try and do that." And I was like trying to do it.
So falling asleep, not too long after this parable then, Peter, James, and John fell asleep twice when Jesus told them to stay awake while I go pray.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Even these icons of the faith can't stay awake, so
Right.
beat ourselves up for falling asleep.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So what other thoughts do we have?
Have we addressed all of your dozen questions?
No. Do you want to hear some of my questions? So why the number 10? Usually we, a lot of times we're talking about 12 and we're talking about tribes so why do we have 10 bridesmaids? Any thoughts?
Well, that's why I thought it was important, the 50-50, that half the time we could be foolish and half the time we could be wise. Because I agree with you, normally you'd expect a dozen, not 10. Very rarely in biblical context are we on the decimal system. But here we are on the decimal system. So that really implies kind of a percentage thing going on here. And I don't know. That was my reaction. It's probably wrong.
Okay. And so if you were an early Christian and you were hearing this and you were expecting Christ's imminent return, how would you be reading this? What would this message be saying to you? You're an early Christian. Christ hasn't come back yet. What's going on in your head? We're still waiting, by the way.
I know, 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
Well, and I would argue we're still, yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be early Christians. I mean, we're in the same boat, right? I mean, we're
Yes.
expecting
Worse.
Christ to come. The question, I think we all have this strange notion that he's going to, lo, he comes with clouds descending and there's music and, it's all this hoopla.
Hollywood.
It may be in a still small voice that he comes. I mean, I don't know how God comes. The moments that I thought I've gotten close to encountering God have usually been pretty quiet moments, not loud ones. So to me, the ultimate thing is remembering that he can come at any moment. And we need to be open for that and ready to receive him. And the mistake of the foolish virgins was that they weren't really prepared. They were so frazzled and excited that they forgot to have any reserve oil. And then they were afraid to stay in the dark, even though they were with 5 other virgins who had lamps. I mean, why really did they have to go back and get lights for their lamps? I mean, there would be fewer lamps to greet the bridegroom, but why did they have to go do that? Why couldn't they greet him in the dark, right? Because there were 5 lamps. I guess they had to have 10. I don't know. It's a sort of obsessing about the details. And if we think about weddings, we know that weddings are an occasion where people obsess about details and they go so totally over the top with having to have it be exactly that way or the world will end, right?
Well,
And so, that's an interesting thing. I mean, so I think we are all like that. We all get so, he's going to come in the way that I expect him to come, and I'm going to greet him in the way that I expect him to greet him. And we're actually not prepared for the way he will come, and we're not prepared to do it. He may come when I'm on the toilet. Yeah, I mean, that's
Probably.
the truth. You don't have to include that in the sermon, Alma Susan, but I just,
Tom said,
if he can come like a thief in the night, if he can come like a family member arriving late when not everybody is there to greet him, I mean, the point is we just have to be ready and eager. I don't know how to put it. I'm not saying it right.
I'm getting it. And I'm actually kind of thinking when you said fuss, like fussing about the details, is making me think about, so going back to the whole idea of church and bridesmaids, maybe the bridesmaids are the attendants in the church. And we fuss about the details, but what's the real thing we should be doing? How do we pace ourselves? How do we sustain ourselves, especially in this awful pandemic? I don't know about you, but I felt like the door got shut on me yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, it did. It literally did get shut because we were going to go in that church,
Right.
and we were going to have Eucharist, and I was, spent an hour on the with Tom and Tina, and sorry, getting fussy again here. And we were all super pumped for the wedding feast,
Right.
party. And then it was like the door got slammed, the bishop said no. And I was like, well, can't we just have a couple? That's what I was thinking. Just give me these 2 Sundays, and then I'll be okay for a while. And I said to Jim after I, saw I was blubbering pretty good. And Jim said, I said, I feel like the rug's been pulled out from under me. And he said, it's not you feel. He said, you did have the rug pulled out from under you. And so I'm just like, I feel like, it's very hard to be sustaining ourselves as the bridesmaids right now. So I'll shut up.
When you don't have to shut up permanently, but when you were offline, I was commenting on how impressed I was that within hours after the door was slammed, the whole St. Andrews team pulled together, made decisions, and things kept going with just a tiny little blip on the screen. So I'm very impressed, even though you were doing this through your tears, that all of this has been reconstructed. And here we are with a Bible study Wednesday morning, and we don't have to wear a mask when we arrive. So I'm impressed that
I can hear you all.
resilience and the commitment to keep us together permeates our little community. So thank you for
Yes, it does.
our leader in that.
I'm with Bill, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think keeps us going, is the fact that, like it says in our reading today, be prepared. Well, we are prepared. It's not what you wanted or what any of us wanted for Sunday, but Sunday that we get together will happen. And so we just need to keep connected, whether it's on the phone, our newsletter, we're Zooming. We just need to keep doing that. And that's what God wants us to do. And we're doing it. And like Bill said, it all happened. It was plan A and plan B went right in. So
Yeah.
you just have to be thankful for that.
We love you,
Other
Susan.
churches in the area that don't have that, maybe they could look into it. Apparently they haven't chosen to do it. And I feel bad for those people who aren't having the connection that we are having. That's a blessing, a really big blessing.
Well, and I also would argue that this happens to us all the time individually. You wake up and you have a cold, or you're sick, and you can't go to church, and it's very disappointing.
Yes,
You
it
go
is.
out, try to start the car, and the battery's dead, and you have to call AAA, and an hour later it gets charged. I mean,
Tom, you should have had an extra spare battery in your garage.
yeah, tell that to Ivan, who was at the Cumberland Farms in Winthrop when his starter went out.
Or it's 25 below and the garage door decides to freeze to the floor. Like it happened to me one Sunday.
So, I mean, I know that collectively, and so I just have to say, you know, I know, Susan, you're very disappointed. I was grateful. I actually sent a note to the bishop expressing my gratitude because I said, this is good. You made a brave, difficult decision and now everyone can be mad at you. Rather than all of us struggling to make the right decision, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And remember, look at the great picnic that we had.
Oh, we did, yeah.
And we were together then, and we
Yeah.
have that. And again, we have to remember the church isn't the building, it's us. It's you and I. And we
Sandy,
have each
right.
other. We have great communication
Yeah,
thanks to
Yes.
this technology and the people that have all the wherewithal to put it together. But yeah, I mean, that's what's important.
Right.
and there's some among us, particularly I'm looking at Sandy and Kathy right now and Bill. There's some of us, some of you that have the spiritual gifts of encouragement. And that is, it is also known sometimes as being the cheerleader, the
Yay.
encourager.
Yay.
But the encourager, someone who can encourage others is like essential. That's like the oil in the lamp that keeps us
Oh,
sustained. You're the oil in the lamp, and some of us are, pounding on the door, and we all got our gifts, and that's like I love the question Tom said, like, why didn't they just go in with 5 lamps? They could have shared the lamps, they didn't all need oil, but
right.
Yeah.
maybe
My
it's just,
reaction when I heard the bishop's words when Tom played the video, I just felt love. I felt how he must love us to make that hard decision, because I'm sure it wasn't easy for him.
yeah.
Yeah. But I believe he did it out of love to keep us safe.
Right.
Right. And so we don't have to worry about having our, the proper altar candles, and we don't, as long as we have the intention of walking in love
Right.
as Christ loved us, then we will get through that door when that door is there,
Yes.
whenever it arrives.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It will.
You must have been looking into my deep, deep past. In high school, senior year, a buddy of mine and I established 2 male members of the cheerleading squad. So we
We
opened
did.
the door for that to be happening subsequently.
Excellent.
And we
So
were,
I actually nailed it. So I guess it's 10:05, and I know that 10:15 is when our time runs out, technically. But so I just want to check in, have some wrap-up thoughts and a little prayer before we go on our way. So let's just go around. I'm looking at Tom, and I'll call on you first, and we'll go to Kathy, Sandy, Tina, Bill. Okay? So Tom, last thoughts?
Well, it is interesting to think about this lesson in the context of the bishop's decision and how we've carried on both before it and now after it. And to think about all the ways in which we did try to prepare, and yet still were surprised along the way. And so we were both foolish and wise,
Both and,
and
yep.
we were both prepared and unprepared, because there's like being prepared logistically, and then there's being prepared emotionally.
Right.
And I think that's going to be more intense as this pandemic gets worse. I mean, it's getting more and more worse all the time. Ivan's niece called yesterday to say that her mother and her mother's new husband both have COVID now.
Oh.
And so, and our prayer list might get awfully long with people who are going to be struggling with this. And we might think we're prepared. We might think we're all wise bridesmaids, but then we'll a moment will come and we might discover we're foolish too, you know.
Very good thoughts, Tom. Thank you. Kathy,
I don't know what to say. Just hold each other in love.
okay. Sandy,
I think we have to always remember that glass is half full. And I think that's what's going to be really important through all this. And I think that, again, that yes, there are medical reasons why COVID's increasing, but I think a lot of people have gotten complacent
Yes.
and just aren't maintaining those masks and social distancing and the partying. And I think we need to pray that they kind of wake up and smell the flowers.
Right.
Excellent.
Thank you. Tina,
This week, earlier this week, before this happened, Tom had to call everybody in the family and say, we're sorry, but there's not going to be Thanksgiving dinner. And that was very, very hard for him to do. That's one of the highlights of his year, is to have the family here for Thanksgiving dinner. So, but I think he'll be all right. We're hoping we'll be able to Zoom that day and at least, see each other, and even though we aren't sharing a meal. And I think that's what's really important, is being able to connect.
Right.
I think that he felt just like the bishop felt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah, yep. Bill,
I am so grateful for all of you, and Mama Susan, for your leadership.
grateful for you too, Bill. And of course, you all know how I feel. I love all of you, and super bummed that we don't get to hang out in person for a little while, but I think I'm gonna draw on Sandy's glass half full and say that let us keep our oil flasks half full with the spiritual oil of love and affection and kindness and compassion and mercy and all those good things that Christ gives us. As long as we're drawing on the major source of all of that good oil, we can go this long haul. So with that, I will say, excuse me, I will croak these final words, and I'll say a little prayer. So let us pray. God, who is the oil of our lives, who keeps our lamps lit, who lights the way always for us, we beseech you to illumine our way and to hold us close to you and to one another, to help us through these very hard times of separation and uncertainty. But we also know in our deepest hearts of hearts that you are always with us, and that you will never leave us, and the door is always open, and we can always knock and you will answer. So we pray that you just guide us, guard us, and sustain us until such time as we will be all together again as one body. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So I guess we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you on either on daily meditation or on Sunday. So love you all.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.